In 490 BC, the Athenians had defeated a Persian invasion force in the Battle of Marathon. But the Persian King of Kings, Darius, quickly began gathering an even larger army to end the Greeks for good. But outside circumstances intervened. In 486, the Egyptians revolted against Persian rule, and while preparing an army to quell the revolts, Darius died. Rule of his empire passed to his son, Xerxes I. Xerxes did not forget the insolence of the Greeks. In 480, Xerxes came to Sardis in the satrapy of Lydia and put together an enormous invasion force. Most scholars think it was around 200,000 men. This was to be a coordinated land and sea campaign, with a fleet of warships able to logistically support the army. The second invasion of Greece was about to begin.
10 years had passed since Marathon. In Athens, a man named Themistocles had climbed the political ladder of the young democracy. He had fought at Marathon, and by the mid-480s BC, he had become one of the most prominent politicians in Athens. He filled a void left behind when Miltiades had died from a wound in 489 BC. Throughout this decade, Themistocles continually pushed for the construction of a fleet, but he was always met with resistance. Reports were trickling in of preparations beginning for a new invasion, and the Athenians were wholly unprepared. But in 483, a new vein of silver was found near Athens. Themistocles advocated for this wealth to be used for the creation of a navy. The assembly eventually agreed, and aware of the growing threat of a Persian invasion, they ordered the construction of even more ships than Themistocles had requested. About 100 miles as the crow flies to the southwest was the city-state of Sparta. The Spartans were recognized as the preeminent city-state of the time, with Athens being merely a wealthy upstart. The Spartans were still recognized as the strongest military in Greece, but they had suffered the humiliation of not participating at Marathon. Their force of 2,000 hoplites had not reached the battlefield until days after the battle had ended, in time to see the freshly raised mound in honor of the Athenian dead. So when word arrived a new invasion was crossing into Thrace, the Spartans committed to playing a more active role. An alliance of up to 70 city-states gathered at Corinth and agreed to form a unified defense. Sparta and Athens were the leading cities, but other notable cities were Chalkis, Corinth, and Megara. Notably absent were Thebes and Argos. With the alliance facing such a numerous foe, a choke point was needed to eliminate the Persians' numerical advantage. First, a site in Thessaly called the Vale of Tempe was selected. With the arrival of spring, Xerxes and his army had crossed into Thrace, and a 10,000-man allied Greek force marched north to secure the pass. But as they arrived, the king of the Macedonians warned the alliance of several paths which the swarming Persian army could use to surround them. The alliance pulled back, and the cities of Thessaly promptly surrendered to Xerxes. The next site to the south, suitable to the alliance, was at Thermopylae, a narrow pass between steep mountains and the sea. At the same time, the Athenian-led navy chose the narrow straits of Artemisium to block the advance of the Persian fleet. The speed of the Persian advance caught the alliance by surprise, however, and the Spartans were wholly unprepared to hold the pass. It was nearly 10 years to the day since Marathon, and again the Spartans were restricted by the festival of Carneia. They would not muster their army until the festival had ended. This time, though, 300 of the Spartan warriors, including one of the Spartan kings, Leonidas, along with around 900 Spartan auxiliaries, marched out to guard the pass. They were joined by a few hundred hoplites each from a dozen other cities, bringing their total number to 5,000 to 7,000. At Thermopylae, these few thousand allied Hellenes stood across a 100-meter-wide pass, reinforced by a low wall, and withstood the full force of the 120,000 Persians for 2 days of battle, while inflicting very heavy losses on their enemy. On the morning of the third day, though, word came of a force of 20,000 Persians up above them, following a goat trail which led to their rear. They were about to be surrounded. At dawn, Leonidas gathered the army and advised any who desired to leave. Most of the army left, but Leonidas, the 300 Spartans, and a total of at least 2,000 remained to guard the retreat of the others. About to be surrounded, the remaining Greeks leapt from their wall and charged the Persian lines, attempting to cause as many casualties as possible. In the melee, many Persians died, but so too did Leonidas. His companions fought to gather his body and then retreated back behind their wall to a low hill. They were totally surrounded now. Appalled by his losses, Xerxes ordered a shower of arrows fall upon the remaining Greeks until none survived. The story of the 300 Spartans, so romanticized over the centuries, is misleading. While there were 300 Spartans in the last stand, they did not stand alone. In the Battle of Thermopylae, up to 20,000 of the Persians were killed. But for an army this large, they were more delayed than wounded. Simultaneously, about 50 miles away, in the narrow straits between Euboea and the mainland, the Athenians were engaged in the Battle of Artemisium. The 271 Greek trireme ships were attempting to block passage of the Persian navy through the straits. Fortune was on the Greek side. First, a third of the roughly 1,200 Persian ships were destroyed in a storm. Then, seeing the Greek ships blocking the straits, 200 ships were sent around the Isle of Euboea to surround them. But these ships too were destroyed in another storm. Back at the straits, the remaining Persian ships, still with a significant numerical advantage, engaged in small skirmishes with the Greeks. On the third day, the main battle took place, with each side suffering similar losses. With fewer ships, though, these losses were unsustainable for the Greeks. The battle ended that day with nightfall. As the Greek allies discussed whether to continue trying to hold the straits, they received word of the defeat at Thermopylae. With their strategy requiring the blocking of both land and sea having failed, the navy retreated towards Athens. Having dispelled the Greeks on land and at sea, the path to Attica and Athens was open. In the city, an evacuation was ordered. The Allied navy arrived at Athens and transported the population across the bay to the safety of the island of Salamis. Athens was left deserted. Atop the Acropolis, a few Athenians resisted, but the Persians soon broke in, destroying the temples on the Acropolis and burning Athens. A new line of defense was made by the Allies at the Isthmus of Corinth, and several walls were constructed. But again, the Allies would have to be victorious at stopping both the land and sea forces of the Persians. The land defenses were strong, but could easily be bypassed if Xerxes had control over the seas. Xerxes looked to knock out the Greek navy in a decisive battle. The Allies needed to stop the Persian fleet if they had any hope of survival. A site just off the coast of Athens was chosen by Themistocles. The Allied fleet had found the straits of Artemisium too wide. At the Straits of Salamis, they lied in wait in an even narrower position. Once the Persian ships, numbering about 700 or 800, had been lured into the tight water of the strait, under the command of Themistocles, the Greek ships, numbering about 350, attacked. In the cramped space, the Persians were not able to maneuver, and the Greeks were able to sink at least 200 of their ships, bringing a decisive victory to the Allied city-states. Watching from a hillside overlooking the water, Xerxes was witness to the destruction of his navy. The Battle of Salamis was a turning point in the Second Invasion. The alliance had avoided total defeat. Xerxes now fled Greece and returned to Sardis. Although the Persian King of Kings had left, a large army remained in Thrace under the general Mardonius. The following year, after spending the intervening months subduing the north of Greece, Mardonius's army headed south and reoccupied Athens. When summer arrived, word reached him that a large army had left the Peloponnese and was marching toward him. He and his army retreated to the region of Boeotia, where a fortified camp was built. The site near the town of Plataea was chosen for its plain, which would allow the full use of the cavalry. The allied army followed and took up a position on a hillside overlooking the Persians, not letting themselves be drawn into a position where the cavalry could attack. A standoff ensued for 11 days. The Greek line had the Athenians on the left, a mix of several city-states in the center, and the Spartans on the right. Mardonius's cavalry employed hit-and-run tactics to harass the allied line and try to provoke them to come down from the hillside. In one of these charges, the Persian cavalry commander was killed, and the rest of the horsemen fled. Encouraged by this small victory, and with the threat of the cavalry seemingly neutralized, the allies moved lower on the hill, where there was a better water source. Mardonius was willing to wait. He sent forces to halt the supplies being brought over the hillside to the Greeks. And despite their general being killed, the cavalry were soon able to seize and destroy the sole well the Greeks were relying on for water. Short of food and water, the allied Greeks waited 2 more days, hoping for an opportunity to present itself. None came. Finally, the allies decided a retreat was needed, but it would have to be done at night to prevent a charge of the Persians after them. Night fell, and the retreat was sloppy. The center third of the line had gone in the wrong direction, and when day broke, the Athenians on the left and the Spartans on the right hadn't even begun to retreat yet. In the morning light, Mardonius saw the disorder of the Greek lines and ordered a full assault. The Greeks, split into 2 sections, spun round to face their enemies. On the left, the Athenian hoplites had the grim honor of fighting another force of hoplites, the Thebans, who had now allied with the Persians. On the other side of the field, the Spartans faced a huge army of Persians. As was seen at Marathon and at Thermopylae, the heavily armed and armored Greek hoplites were more than a match for the Persian light infantry. The Spartans cut into the Persian lines and advanced. Mardonius was there, on his white horse, shouting commands, surrounded by his 1,000-man bodyguard of elite infantry called the Immortals. The Spartans pressed closer, and according to Plutarch, a Spartan picked up a stone, hurled it, and hit Mardonius in the head, knocking him from his horse and killing him. Seeing their general fall, the Persian morale sank, and all but the bodyguard began to flee. Back across the field, the Athenians had just won a grueling push of shield and spear against the Thebans, the remainder of whom, seeing the Persians fleeing, fled themselves. Although disordered and sloppy, the battle was a great victory for the allied Greeks. This victory was not just a stalling or wounding of the Persians, it was a total victory and destruction of the Persian army. Xerxes' general was dead and gone. The Second Persian Invasion, like the first, had been repulsed. On the same day, across the Aegean, the allied Greeks won another total victory. The allied fleet had sailed to Samos, off the Ionian coast, and caught the demoralized Persian navy. The Persian fleet beached their ships nearby, on the coast of the mainland below Mount Mycale, and hastily built a palisade wall to defend themselves. The allied Greeks landed their marines, and despite the fortifications, advanced and attacked the Persian position. Once again, the heavily armored hoplites proved superior and inflicted heavy losses on the Persians. Before long, the Ionian contingent in the Persian army defected, and the remaining Persians were utterly defeated, and their entire fleet destroyed. This victory on the far side of the Aegean marked the beginning of a new phase, where the Greeks would take the offensive to Persia. Shortly after, the Allies freed Thrace from Persian rule and captured Byzantion, blocking the Persians from easily crossing back into Greece. But already, in the opening moves of the counterattack, cracks began to form in the Greek alliance. Next time, we will see the city-states of Greece, in their moment of great victory, descend into infighting and backstabbing. The feud between Athens and Sparta would grow into the generational Peloponnesian War and wreck the flowering cities of Hellas. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. I'll see you next time.